Hello and welcome to our webinar this evening. What is a professional fiduciary and why I might need one? My name is Monique.
Hold on. The attendees are still, no, it's adding. It just takes a minute or two for them to add.
I don't know that I can see them in the ad.
We have 4 attendees right now. We have 6 attendees now. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, welcome. Should we just wait like a couple minutes or it's 5 after until?
I think we can start.
I think we can get started. Yeah,
Started?
we'll be recording this.
Okay, so from the top again, hello and welcome to our webinar this evening, What is a Professional Fiduciary and Why I Might Need One. This is put on by SAS Financial Advisors with our welcomed guests this evening, who will have a chance to introduce themselves in just a moment. Do want to point to a quick disclaimer that this is not legal advice, this is not tax advice, this is rather a broad overview for everyone to get an orientation to the fiduciary profession and how it may fit into your financial plan. But everything is, of course, 100% related to each individual's tailored needs and plans. So if this is something you would like to engage with, please follow up with your advisor, and we're more than happy to connect you with a fiduciary for a consultation. So as individuals, we know the importance of having a financial plan, but oftentimes we're unaware of the resources to carry out that plan. And one prime example is, how do you choose an executor for your trust? That's a really huge and important question that all of us may be asking ourselves as we're planning for our financial future. There's more strategic alternatives to choosing a close family member or a friend. And today we have a talented team of professional fiduciaries, Nina, Jennifer, Elise, and Drake, who will get a chance to introduce themselves and also explain their service, their role, and help you understand when or why this may be a good fit for your plan. Financial plans, as we know, address many life cycle events, including but not limited to financial planning, healthcare planning, trust and estates, and naming a fiduciary for your plans. As an aside, Ira met Nina 10 years ago and has worked with her alongside many of our clients. And since that initial meeting, SAS decided her services were important enough to introduce her as part of our team as a consultant. So some of you may have interfaced already with Nina. And she has introduced us to a wonderful web of fiduciaries with many specializations that have helped our client pool understand what a professional fiduciary does. And many of them carry out this role for our clients. She is an estate planning attorney as well, separate from her engagement with SAS. We are going to ask for the webinar this evening that we hold questions to the end, but please, if you'd like to use the chat, go ahead and place your questions in the chat box, and we will filter them to address to the group at the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Well, thank you, Monique. It's wonderful to be here. I feel very honored to be able to share the stage with the other panelists and with the team from SAS. As Monique said, I am a practicing attorney, but I also often serve as a professional trustee or executor or sometimes conservator. And the reason, we titled this session the way we titled it is because I think most people, even myself, before I came to this profession, didn't know what a professional fiduciary actually was, what they did, or why anyone might need one. I want to spend a moment just introducing the rest of the panel that will be speaking tonight, and then I'll go through an outline of what we'll each be talking about. So first, I'd like to introduce Elise Crum. Elise and I have worked together for the past decade in various scenarios. We cut our teeth working together for another professional fiduciary who has one of the largest books of business in Northern California. So while we were working there, we were exposed to many different types of trusts, many different types of scenarios in which one would need a professional fiduciary or benefit from utilizing a professional fiduciary. And then Elise came to work with me and help me in my business while she was studying for her licensure and exam. And she established her own solo practice as a professional fiduciary last year. So congratulations, Elise. The next person on the panel that I'd like to introduce is Drake Tam. He is someone that I've worked with for years in a different setting, and I have sort of cultivated encouraging him to explore this profession. I'm so glad that he has. He's a freshly minted professional fiduciary, joining the field earlier this year. His background is in care management and business development within the home care industry, where he helped individuals age in place and supplied care providers to medical facilities. Last but not least, Jennifer Winship is another professional fiduciary and social worker that I have had the pleasure of working with and sharing cases with at times. She's been licensed as a private professional fiduciary for the past 11 years and has been a clinical social worker for 22. She enjoys working as a conservator, and she specializes in special needs trust. Her background prior to all of this was in county behavioral health with the sickest 2% of the population. She's an expert in navigating complicated public benefits, systems of care, as well as assisting with complex psychiatric and medical issues. She enjoys working as a consultant and can assist during crisis situations. So welcome, panelists. Thank you for having us, SAS. After I go through this roadmap, Elise will be the next to present, and she's going to offer up some juicy scenarios that might ring a bell or two for some of you that talks about, why a fiduciary, may be needed with real life examples. Sorry, can you go back one slide really quick, Monique? I apologize. And then after Elise, highlights these various pitfalls and real life scenarios, Drake will be talking about incapacity. I think sometimes when you hear the word trustee or executor, you're only thinking about what happens after you die. But I think as professional fiduciaries, we're all more concerned with what happens to you when you're still alive, but you lose some level of capacity. So he'll be highlighting this arena and some of the costs associated with staying in your home, aging in place, and alternatives to doing that and why you might consider those alternatives. And then finally, Jennifer will be talking to how professional fiduciaries can be beneficial in involvement with families that may have special needs children or people with disabilities, unique family situations. And then finally at their end, there will be contact information. If you want to contact any of us directly, you can also contact SAS, but we're happy to hear from you if you have specific questions. So with that, I'm going to just give a highlight of what the definition of a fiduciary is. I mean, simply stated, it's, one of the highest levels of trust that can be developed in a relationship. And that means that a fiduciary is always making decisions for the benefit of someone else, and doing so in a way that does not takes themselves out of the equation. So it's a very high level of trust, and in California, it's regulated through the arm of Consumer Affairs. There's a regulatory agency, Professional Fiduciaries Bureau, through which professional fiduciaries are licensed, have to maintain continuing education, and commit to a certain level of ethics and service as mandated reporters. So with that, I'm going to open this up for Elise to share some various scenarios and hypotheticals.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Again, I am Elise Crum, and I'm going to talk to you about some different real life scenarios that I've actually been involved with. So, obviously, all of the names have been changed for privacy concerns. First, I would like to go over a few questions to keep in mind when everyone here is either creating or updating or considering an estate plan. I believe it's the next slide, Monique. Maybe one more.
Sorry, I skipped a slide.
No,
Let
that's
me get
okay.
back. Let me explain. I skipped a slide. So, some of the roles that professional fiduciaries serve in are as successor trustees, powers of attorney for healthcare or finances, executors, conservators. And they can also serve as rep payees for Social Security or other benefits. So this is really, choosing somebody that can advocate for you, that can manage your financial or medical decisions if you were unable to, and making those choices while you're able to for future planning. And then the next slide, Monique, I can talk a little bit about why you might choose someone to do those instead of the default, oldest child or family member or friend. Next slide, please. Okay. One of the critical reasons is neutrality. Often, if you have, several children and the oldest child is serving, they may be doing a great job, but the perception may be that they are making decisions in a biased or unfair way, whether they are or not. So sometimes just having a neutral party that has no benefit for making a decision, that can be perceived as benefiting them directly, and rather making decisions that can be perceived by all parties, all beneficiaries, as being fair, is very helpful, especially in the dynamics of family relationships when people are grieving the loss of maybe a parent, and it reverts people to old resentments from childhood among siblings, for example. Another reason you might consider a professional is because they are actually doing this as a career. So they are not inventing the wheel every time they are working on a matter. They have current relevant access and information. Like I said, there's requirements for continuing education. Often we're networking with each other, attorneys, care providers, facilities. So we have more relevant and update information than, say, a loved one who's never encountered this before, doesn't have those resources, trying to figure this out by just calling, a place for mom, for example. Also experience. I mean, fiduciaries come from many different backgrounds and disciplines. And so the relevant experience that a particular fiduciary may have may be really adept at certain things that your family or yourself may need help with. Again, back to promoting family harmony, it's better for everybody to feel that the person that is making decisions about distributions, how things are divided, is perceived as neutral. Efficiency. So often, you have someone that is very intelligent, a family member, a friend who's willing to do this, but they are learning how to do it while they are doing a trust administration. So they may not, it may take much longer to complete the trust administration or to figure certain things out, which can also lead to disgruntled beneficiaries if they feel like this process is taking too long. Finally, not to burden loved ones. I mean, this is work. This can be a lot of work. It can be a full-time job for someone. So if you are considering naming someone that has their own responsibilities, such as a family or a job, or lives, geographically far away, it could be really burdensome to name somebody. It's not a kindness sometimes to name someone because they feel obligated to do so, but they may not actually have the bandwidth to do so. knowledge of the system. Again, this goes back to, relevant, current access to resources, and also having worked within various systems and knowing how various systems work. We're often touching, Social Security, CalPERS, long-term care benefits, financial advisors, tax regulations. So there's a lot of different fields that a professional fiduciary is working within, and has experience doing. While almost every person's situation is unique upon illness or death, there are certain fundamental things that are across the board the same. There's going to need to be a tax return done. There's going to need to be certain reporting done. So it's when you have a professional doing this, they have a checklist of items that need to get done. They're not Googling to try and figure out what the next step is. Again, professionals are regulated by the state of California. They're bondable. They carry errors and omissions insurance. And, ultimately, again, I can't underscore enough how important neutrality is.
I will say, just hearing that list, it's like, oh, hands down, fiduciary. This is a lot. And I think a lot of times when people are doing estate planning, it's very customary to choose like the eldest child to serve this role. But after hearing everything that's involved, and I think a lot of individuals who have served as executors are the only ones who really know how much is involved and probably would not choose a sibling or a child or a close friend, just knowing all that agony they went through. So I think it's really helpful to understand everything that's involved in being an executor and everything that's involved in a fiduciary's role, why this role exists, because for many of us, we are unfamiliar with the term. So it's super helpful to hear this overview.
Yeah. And finally, not to be the scary attorney, but there's a lot of liability involved. So if you are not adept at these things, it can create personal liability for a family member that's trying to carry these things out as well. Okay, so I think now, so this leads into one of my other favorite topics about, so you want neutrality? Well, let's name two people to serve as co-trustees. And sometimes this can work, but I would say, you really have to consider who the co-trustees are serving. I've had blended families that think, in the effort of fairness, we'll name the oldest child from each branch of the family to serve together. I mean, hypothetically, this could work, but the reality of what I've seen is it almost never works. It can create more problems, and functionally, mechanically, most banks, most financial institutions don't want to accept it either. So they're not going to allow two people to sign checks. They're not going to allow two people to have move money authorization. So even if in the hypothetical, it seems like it would work, it often doesn't, either because of the personalities of the two trustees trying to work together, or because financial institutions just absolutely want one person to be controlling certain things. Again, the intent is fairness, but it can just often be unmanageable. And again, it can cause strife in the family. And when you mix money and grief, strife in the family is very common, even with families that were behaving nicely prior to a death or prior to someone getting sick. So always a better solution, I would say, rather than a co-trustee schema, is to explore a professional fiduciary.
I think also too, a lot of people may be feeling that this is a super daunting task. So they may be putting it off, or it's at the end of the list. And then what happens if we don't make a decision, right? So not making a decision is also a decision.
Yes, so there is a plan. You just may not choose that plan. And that is often when we're talking about conservatorships, how they came about is that someone procrastinated to the point that they had no plan in place, or they didn't have a workable plan in place. And now they no longer have the capacity, meaning maybe they can't handle their finances anymore, they can't handle their medical decisions anymore. And that default plan is what's called a conservatorship. And a conservatorship is exactly like a guardianship for a minor child. It's just for an adult. So essentially, it's not something most of us would want. It restricts some of the civil rights of the person. It also puts a lot of authority on the court to make decisions about where the person will live, what the spending plan for that person is, what kind of medical treatments they get. And I think most people, if they envisioned that they might get some degenerative disease like dementia, or have some sort of level of cognitive impairment, they would rather have chosen who the person was that was going to be acting on their behalf and making decisions for them, rather than the court or adult protective services choosing who the person is that's going to be making these decisions. So the sooner you make a plan, the less likely, and a well thought out plan that's going to work, the less likely you are to be subject to something like a conservatorship. And I do think, they're a necessary evil in a way. I mean, there is a reason that conservatorships are a safety net. And I know with, Britney Spears and whatever else you've seen in the media, right, they can be viewed in a really bad light. But when they're necessary, it's usually very protective and very necessary. But most conservatorships could have been avoided through good planning and thoughtfulness about the plan. Okay. Now,
Ah,
I'm sorry. I
no,
turn for real now. Thank you.
totally fine, totally fine. So, as I was saying, these are all real life scenarios that I have dealt with or been involved with in some form of capacity before. Mina may be remembering some of these as I go through them as well. So a few questions I want everyone to keep in mind when either making their estate plan, adjusting it because maybe you already have one in place, and after this webinar, you've decided, oh, I need to change things up. Here are some things I would like everyone to keep in mind. Because are all families dysfunctional, or is it just mine? I'd like to think maybe everybody's got a little dysfunction, but do you believe that your families or beneficiaries of your estate plan can grieve the loss of you while managing your finances and making appropriate decisions that don't create conflict or resentment? Again, as Mina was speaking to, you mix money and emotions, and sometimes it is a grounds for trouble. Do you have a trusted family member or friend that you can that you believe can handle all financial matters or healthcare matters on your behalf? The good thing about a properly written estate plan is there are multiple layers. So not necessarily is the same person you want to make your medical decisions the same person that you would like to handle your funds. They can be the same person, but they can also be different people. How confident are you that none of your family or beneficiaries will dispute your will or estate plan? We would all love to think that, hey, I have this written in stone. It is what it is, but believe it or not, um, there could be disputes. And it is estimated that around 58% of families have some type of issues during administration. That is a huge number. And of course, being a professional fiduciary, I see it in almost all of my cases because that's why I'm put in place. So the best way to avoid conflict is to be proactive and consider who will fulfill various roles within that plan. Next slide, please. So this is case study number 1, and I call this the fall. So we have an 85-year-old woman living in her home in Oakland that has 5 children. She's recently fallen ill and requires 24-hour care and has lost capacity to make her own decisions. She has approximately $100,000 in liquid assets. The 4 younger siblings are against the way the oldest sibling has dealt with their mother's finances and care so far. Upon the 85-year-old's passing, the oldest sibling removes some jewelry from the home, as she claims her mother stated she wanted her to have it. Again, something that is very common, that happens. The youngest sibling takes up residence in the mother's home, claiming she wanted him to live there rent-free. The oldest sibling was appointed as trustee, and the younger four siblings are now suing her for the mishandling of their mother's estate. Now, the reality of this case was that um, the sibling rivalry delayed the resolution of the distribution of this trust by, I believe, if I remember correctly, approximately 4 years after our client's passing. So there, with this particular case, um, it could have been avoided if there was a neutral party that was in charge of the estate and the trust upon the siblings' mother passing. So uh, again, perfect example of how
Is that Elise's
one
connection or is it mine?
I think it's
think
Elise.
Okay.
that
If you want to go to the
the
next slide,
appoint
I think the next case.
and it next slide, please.
Um, so I think Elise is breaking up a
Can
little
you
bit.
can you hear me now?
Yep. Are you working now?
Oh, are we good?
We're good now.
Oh, I think.
No, not good.
Okay, we're
I'll
good
do
now?
the next one. I'll do the next one, Elise.
Can I add real quick here?
Yes.
Hi. If anyone has questions during the webinar, we'll take them at the end, but there in your Zoom window should be a Q&A. It's a little question mark icon that you can select and then type in your questions there, and we can collaborate or consolidate those at the end. So just wanted to, thanks guys.
So
Can you all see me now and hear me now?
yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I switched over on my connection, talking about internet problems earlier, right? Okay, so case study number 2 is the unexpected disability and the helpful cousin. Marie is a 45-year-old woman who survived a horrific motorcycle accident in San Francisco and now has a traumatic brain injury. Due to her TBI, Marie asked her cousin Sally to help her manage her finances. Again, another common thing that happens, a trusted friend or family member, and to help plan for her care. Sally moves Marie from her loft in downtown Oakland to upstate New York, where Sally currently lives. During her recovery, Sally convinces Marie that it would be best to sell her condo, move in with Marie long term, and add her to Marie's bank accounts so she can make sure all of Marie's bills are paid. In theory, again, sounds great. Although Marie is hesitant, she agrees as she thinks Sally is looking out for her best interests, which, if we choose a friend or family member, most of us would hope would happen. After the sale, Marie starts to notice that Sally has been taking money out of her accounts without her permission. When confronted, Sally claims that she has been funding a trust for Marie to help her out. After further investigation, Marie finds out that Sally has not funded a trust, but has spent over $200,000 on cosmetic surgery for herself. Marie removes Sally from her bank accounts and moves back to San Francisco, where she ultimately lands herself under conservatorship managed by the Public Guardian's Office because she has fallen victim to other financial scams repeatedly. Marie's bank accounts have gone from a value of around 600,000 to just over 75,000 in the matter of 3 years. And this situation is unfortunately a lot more common than I wish it was. While this is not the case for everyone, sometimes clients that we've all dealt with have the most well-meaning family members in the beginning that potentially get tempted or think they're doing right by their family member, with large sums of money being at their disposal. Just again, another reason to have the extra layer of protection by choosing someone who not only, as Mina spoke to, assumes the liability of managing your funds, but also has the experience in what to do with, potentially large sums of money. And then case study number 3, the family fraud. So Mike and Teresa are in their mid-70s and have 2 adult children, Michelle and Thomas. Their daughter Michelle has helped them out a lot the past few years, including transitioning from their home to assisted living community. Mike and Teresa sold their home in San Jose for just over $2 million. Thomas was not happy about the sale of the home, as he frequently lived with his parents off and on over the course of his adult life because of his substance abuse issues. Unfortunately, Mike passed away suddenly, and Teresa developed early onset of dementia. She now has increased care costs and needs. Thomas convinces his mother to give him his dad's life insurance proceeds to get on his feet, since he can no longer live with them. Thomas goes through the $250,000 in life insurance proceeds in less than 2 years. Michelle did not realize Teresa gave funds to Thomas until she was later granted conservatorship of her mother and began to go through her historical financial records. Due to the increase in memory care costs, which Drake will talk to you all about soon, and unknowingly gifting Thomas about a third of her money, Teresa can no longer afford her private facility and is forced to move into a state-funded nursing facility. And as my colleague Drake will discuss soon, care costs are astronomically high and are only going to get higher as the years go on. It's important to consider that you could need a substantial amount of money per year for private care or private assisted living. The Medi-Cal and Medicare system is difficult to not only navigate, but the need for state-funded nursing home beds far outweighs what is currently available, which I believe myself and a current client, as well as Mina, have experienced in just the recent few weeks. So in summary, it's always better to have a plan than not. A comprehensive trust and estate plan, along with a trusted financial advisor and a professional fiduciary, can not only significantly reduce the stress of loved ones upon your passing, but also help you feel less stress and anxiety about what's going to happen upon your passing as well. The use of a professional fiduciary can reduce family conflicts and other issues that may come up. We kind of see everything that happens. We're very well versed in a lot of different familial situations. So just based on the experience level of the professional fiduciary that you could potentially choose, they could obviously tailor their experience to benefit each individual case. And a professional fiduciary is held to a higher standard and code of ethics and must ensure that your trust is executed as you planned to every extent possible. Obviously, there will be hiccups. Someone could get upset and attempt to interfere with that, or, go to court and try to delay things, but a professional fiduciary will ensure that your trust and estate plan is executed as you planned as possible. And using a professional fiduciary in conjunction with a trust and estate plan can avoid unnecessary legal costs and delays. Probate is very long and expensive, and probate is very easily triggered in the state of California, especially if you do not have a trust or a estate plan set up, leaving more of your assets available to the beneficiaries of your choosing.
So I just
So
want to, oh, sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
go ahead. No, it's totally fine.
So, on the topic of family members or people coming out of the woodworks and contesting a will or an estate plan, if there's a friend or family member that's appointed, their decision-making process may be swayed, or they could be self-dealing in that regard. But when a fiduciary is involved, and if someone does contest, that would have to go through the court system. So you're more likely to follow exactly what's in black and white in the estate plan, in the trust, rather than money and emotions getting mixed up and causing drama, right?
Exactly.
Well said, Monique. You're a quick learner, it seems like. And thank you, Elise, for covering that component. Now that we have a relative understanding of what a professional fiduciary does, the various roles that we could serve in, and some of the interesting scenarios that were shared here from Elise, we're going to pivot gears a bit to something a little more intimate and arguably the most important decision as it pertains to someone's dignity and aging, your selection of care for yourself or your loved one. As Mina introduced me in the beginning of the presentation, my name is Drake Tam. Prior to my engagement being a professional fiduciary, my background is in senior care. So for the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'll be your inside agent. During this portion of my presentation, we'll be going over some of the best care options for you or your loved one, should they be presented with incapacity. We'll go over pricing, some of the secret sauce as it pertains to each channel, and lastly, planning for the future. And before we begin here, I do want to make a note. There are various types of incapacity, such as autism, mental health disorders, loss of motor function. But when I refer to incapacity during my dialogue, it's going to be mainly geared toward dementia, which is more of an umbrella term. You have the most popular and, sorry, we'll say notorious, Alzheimer's, you have Lewy body, there's Parkinson's, there's frontal temporal, and there's many more. And for those that attended this presentation for the special needs component, Jennifer will be covering that right after my slides. Over to the next slide. So understanding your care options. So I created a simple graph, as I've always wished someone in the industry had some sort of easy to understand resource that isn't biased, so a family could weigh out their options for care. So unless you're living with your loved one that is helping out, on the screen, you will find your best 6 alternatives for care. I find this beyond important to make the most informed decision, of course, from a care perspective, but also from a financial lens. There's a common misconception that Medicare will cover these costs when the time occurs, and unfortunately, it's all private pay. And for those of you that just picked up your phone to text Ira saying, like, dude, what the hell? You talked about this long-term care insurance policy, Drake saying it's private pay, rest assured, that will be accepted. I just want you to know that there's typically a 30 to 120 day elimination period where cost is not covered by the insurance agency. Most families don't think about these options till a triggering event. Most typical scenarios we just heard from Elise is a fall, a hospitalization, chronic diagnosis, or malnutrition, which is the scariest thought, that someone could be going through their own medical complications. Then they are posed with a decision treated as rushed and very expensive. And note, I base the cost on this slide on the Greater Bay Area. So just know if you're dialing in from out of the region, it's probably gonna be a little bit cheaper. So over to slide 3, home care, private duty nursing, and boarding cares. So now that we've seen the overview of the various options, we're going to do a little deeper dive into the home-based options for care. So starting on the left-hand column, and probably the most popular form of care, is home care. This is a general service that can range from a 4-hour shift up to 24 hours in a day. It could be a great option for those that want to remain in their own home, seek a flexible schedule. And since we're talking about incapacity, it's rare to see a 4-hour shift unless it is respite for the spouse that is the primary caregiver for their loved one. More times than not, you're looking at an 8-hour shift or 24 hours in a day. If it's $50 an hour, times that by 8. If it's 24, you're looking at least 8 hours of overtime in a day. Typically, these shifts will operate in tandem. So if it's two 12-hour shifts, or it could be 3 8s, that's the best way to minimize your OT. And just keep the cost a little bit lower. And when it comes to home care, like the primary reason for their visits is to assist with ADLs. And you're going to hear this term a lot during the presentations, and that stands for activities of daily living. This constitutes bathing, toileting, dressing, ambulating, and sometimes even eating. And their secondary focus are IADL, so instrumental activities of daily living. That would constitute grocery shopping, housekeeping, transportation, pet care, meal preparation, medication reminders, and companionship. So something to think about when it comes to home care, it can be one of the more affordable services. However, it really comes down to staffing confinement. The location of where care will be provided is probably obstacle number 1. If you say you want care in San Francisco, it's going to look drastically different if you're asking for care in Pacifica. Even though it could be 5-minute difference, it's the location of the caregivers. So sometimes they may be coming from the East Bay, sometimes they're taking public transportation. How accessible is the real property from the location of the caregiver? And that will be a huge factor when it comes to cost and also the stability of the schedule. Most of these care staff or the nurses or the CNAs that are looking for these assignments, they're looking for a stable income, ongoing revenue, something to stay afloat. So if the schedule is very sparse, sporadic, and I'll call you once a week and I'll figure out when you want to come, it really will not work out. Having pets in the home, you'd be surprised. This could heighten costs, specifically cats. I'm a huge cat lover. He's a pain in the butt. I completely get it. They can be quite moody sometimes. I've seen instances where we've had a big dog in the home. No reported attacks ever in their entire lives. Super sweet, and they see the caregiver assisting mom or dad with ADLs, maybe bathing or something. The dog sometimes goes into fret mode of, "Are you hurting my owner?" And that could be a big issue on the job site, I guess you'd say, and that will heighten costs sometimes. And you'd be surprised. Gender is quite important. I would say the majority of the care staff that I've seen on our rosters throughout the years, it's primarily female caregivers. So if you were to want that typical young, handsome male that just got out of physical therapy school, that may come at additional cost, nor will the agency likely have someone like that on staff. Parking is also a huge issue. If you're in the East Bay, Marin County, Peninsula, yes, there is ample parking. You don't really need to think about that too often. But when it comes to San Francisco, even us that live there, it is an issue to park. It costs a lot of money, and that may be added onto your bills, let alone if the caregiver is even on time. Can't even find parking. I think we go through these excuses all the time. So those are the primary factors I'd bring up when it comes to cost. And something I do want to caution is quality of caregiver. If you pay $40,000 for your brand new Audi, an S4, if it's a faulty product, you could take it back to Audi. So here you go. Like, I want another one. Caregiving may look a lot different. You could pay $40,000 for care, but if you're not bringing up these issues in live time, the care agency may just say, "Well, look, like, we have to pay the overhead for the caregiver that already provided their shifts for the last 3 weeks, and now Miss Johnson is telling me that they don't like this person. Oh, we're not going to refund you." That's what that dialogue will typically sound like behind the scenes. So I just want to bring up a little asterisk around that. Also, when it comes to the quality of the caregiver, like let's say it is a one-off. The individual does live in Pacifica. The staffing agency was able to find a decent caregiver, or let's say they were able to fulfill the desired schedule that the family had presented. It's really important to understand the agency's management style. Are these caregivers going through thorough background checks? What type of clients have they worked with in the past? Is it even applicable to mom or dad's situation? Or are we going out in left field? Are they engaging in ongoing education or training? These are some factors that I would consider if you were to go down the route for home care. Maybe asking the agency straight up. I will also bring up licensed home care agencies are a lot different than unlicensed. W-2 employment versus 1099 could look a lot different. And for example, let's say the real property where care is being provided belongs to a trust. Maybe the floorboards are a little messed up, and that caregiver happens to fall on that shift and they broke their back or they really hurt themselves. That could bring a lot of adverse liability to that trust. So it's really important to go W-2 licensed agencies. And moving over to the middle component, private duty nursing. So home care is classified as non-medical in the state of California. So what happens if you or your loved one require medication administration and you want to stay home? Unless you are living with a loved one, then they could administer the medication. You're likely going to be posed with a situation where you may need a private duty nurse. The most common circumstances that I witness is insulin and post-operational care. If you have a caregiver in home and they could provide medication reminders, however, they can never administer the medication. And there's this gray area when it comes to assisted living, senior care as a whole, where it's called hand over hand. Typically, the caregiver or the CNA or the nurse will align the needle with their arm, and the client will need to put their hand on top to apply lower pressure. Okay. I can't say that is the best method. That is not medical advice at all. Just bringing up some of the concerns if you were to just have a caregiver in-house and you require insulin. Okay. Outside of those typical circumstances, I would say the most common form I see nurses requested is typically from a retired nurse. And I think there's something to it, the comfortability, or they know something in the healthcare system that us lay people may not understand to a complete extent. Maybe I'll do a little bit of research on the back end and get back to you guys. As far as pricing goes for nursing in home, the lower rate you see here on the screen, that will typically reflect an LVN, whereas the higher rate, that will typically be an RN. There are things you could do to drive the price down. I would say similar to caregiving. A lot of these nurses are looking for a sole income, paying for their own overhead. So if the schedule is stable and consistent, and maybe once or twice a week you're going to go visit Miss Johnson for X, Y, and Z, the price may be a little bit cheaper because they have now planning moving forward. They have ongoing revenue and ongoing client, much more likely to be quality nurse. They'll stay on long term, and you could have a good situation. And I won't go too deep down this, but the 1099 versus W-2, how I spoke about that in caregiving, same applies for nurses. And on the far right hand, we're going to be touching on board and cares. So we've gone over home care and nursing, which is facilitated in the comfort of a client's own home. Now we will discuss a little bit more around board and cares, which is essentially assisted living on a smaller scale in a residential setting. It's such a great option for those that are a little resistant, I guess you'd say, to a more facility-like setting, that need a high level of care, so ADLs again, and have moderate dementia. I do want to put a little asterisk here too. For those that have severe dementia, and this is the example I always get here at work, is this young male resident that has dementia. He's so fast, he's strong, he wanders. Board and cares, they typically operate in a smaller setting. So it's contingent upon the amount of beds or the rooms that are in that home. Let's say it's a 3-bedroom home. There may be 1 caregiver to 3 residents. So your odds of catching Jim before he runs out in the street to the highway, the chances are a lot higher than assisted living. And I also do want to bring that back up. I will say boarding cares, you probably have the best value for your price. As you can see under this tab, the 3-to-1 ratio we just spoke about, 6-to-1, that is 1 care staff per 3 residents or 6 residents, which is probably some of the best odds you could possibly find. And you'll hear more about this in the next slide. So if you're not doing one-on-one home care or nursing, the best odds for quality care would probably be boarding care if it is a high level of acuity. And then we'll go over to the next slide for continuing care and assisted living and memory care. So we've covered some of the more home-based options, including the board and care. We're going to be going a little bit over the facility-like settings. So starting on the far left, the CCRC, which stands for Continuing Care Retirement Communities. Majority of these are settings are based on buy-ins. So the buy-in I've seen as low as 250,000. I've seen them reach up into the millions. I would view that simply as a placeholder for the resident. And then each month there's an additional rent. And if you need care, there's an additional cost for care. So it is not all built into one. It could get quite pricey. This model is specifically made up for those that move in independently. And then throughout the years, they start to go from independent living to assisted living. Sometimes it's memory care, and that there is a skilled nursing facility on site for those that have a higher level of care, or if there's a hospitalization, you are not required to go back out into the typical pool of skilled nursing that all we would have to deal with. If you reside at a CCRC, you would have a little bit of priority over the outside patients. And I say potentially when it comes to memory care.
Drake, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure, because I'm watching time, that this is so deep and impactful and so important, and your slides are so good, but I want Jennifer to have enough time to talk and to be able to take a couple questions. So maybe just wrap
I
up.
can put a cap on it. I'm going to be honest,
I'm
there
not
is
telling you
so
to
much
stop.
more.
I want to hear more, and the knowledge you have is amazing, but I want to hear what Jennifer has to say also.
Absolutely.
We'll also have the slides posted on our after follow-up landing page that we'll send out to everyone. So maybe if there's a way to capture as best as you can, we're loving it too. But that's an option there if we need.
That That is all right. I want to leave time for Jennifer, and I feel like we're running out of time for questions. There is so much more, to be honest. So I'm okay with putting a cap on this in the interim.
Do
Is
you
this
want
to us as well, Drake?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Is this slide also yours?
I'm sorry, I just exited off the screen. Having a hard time pulling this back up. Give
It
me 1
is.
second.
I think you should just go through this, Drake, and then Jennifer.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go through.
This is the last slide. Oh, planning for the future. Okay. So just as a whole, I'm not going to walk you through the rest of the scary scenarios that I had cooked up. But fiduciaries, we assess the totality of a situation from a person-centered lens and a financial perspective. So what's most important to our clients, is it level of care? Is it cost? Is it the social dynamics? Is it strategic location to be close to mom or dad or friends or family? Facilitating the care teams. Like this process will typically begin with SAS or another financial advisor to create a spending plan for your loved one. Then understanding what our budgets is. Fiduciaries will typically engage a GCM or aging life care professional or placement agencies to assess the overall situation, which would look like interviewing various providers and touring in the beginning. And then once care is established, the ongoing oversight for the care providers, which would be care conferences, sometimes unexpected visits to the assisted living, keep them on their toes, and then quality assurance visits for our clients. And then Jennifer, I'll cap it there. Please take it away.
Thank you, Drake. No, we're in an effort of time, I'm going to eliminate a few of the little details, and I'm gonna go with just a shortened version. So my name is Jennifer Winship. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a professional fiduciary. My expertise is planning for the disabled beneficiary. And where my heart lies, and one of the reasons I've gotten into this is all parents with adult children wonder what will happen that day when I can't take care of my loved one. Who can pick up the torch? How can I plan for that? So we've planned for the senior a little bit earlier, and so now we're going to plan for your disabled loved one. So in an effort of time, we're going to focus on family relationships and harmony, which is really our goal when we're doing estate planning. It's never really voiced as much as the other tangibles. So for this section, we're going to look back at case study number 3, and we're going to add just a few changes. Okay, so we're going back to Mike and Teresa. They're in their 70s. We've got 2 children, Michelle and Thomas. Michelle is the dutiful daughter who was always there to help, but works a full-time job, has little contact with Thomas since leaving the home 30 years ago. And her nickname for Thomas is Thomas the Terrible. So she's been left to help, and she wants to help mom. But, according to her, Thomas has always lived with the family on and off. He's been dependent on the parents in one way or another, had a couple unsuccessful attempts at living independently, but is really unable to hold the job. Everybody knows he's always going to be dependent on mom and dad. A couple episodes of depression, some paranoia, and he receives SSI. If we add this to the scenario that Elise gave us earlier, Mike and Teresa have never consulted with a professional fiduciary, nor have they hired one. And in the end, it was an avoidable mess. Michelle, the dutiful daughter, is left to pick up the pieces, and Teresa didn't get the care she needed. Alternatively, we're going to go back in time. Mike and Teresa find themselves attending an SAS Financial webinar about professional fiduciaries, and they decide they're going to do their homework so we can have a different outcome. So, while estate planning, Mike and Teresa seek out and find a professional fiduciary after they've interviewed a couple. They find one that can help them put together a special needs trust for Thomas, where the life insurance will already go, and it'll help protect them against unnecessarily undue influence, and it'll also preserve the family dynamics. The dutiful sister can stay a dutiful sister, and she can have an arm's length difference from Terrible the Thomas or Thomas the Terrible. So Mike and Teresa have hired a skilled professional fiduciary. They introduce Michelle and Thomas to the fiduciary early, and they start planning for Thomas's special needs with Thomas as a participant. Part of with the fiduciary is that we want to work with you all along the process. So since Thomas is disabled and collecting public benefits, it's essential for the fiduciary to be knowledgeable about the regulations and to help Thomas keep his SSI, find accessible housing, possibly subsidized housing, or even in-home support services. By starting early, Thomas and the family have had time to gain rapport with the professional fiduciary, make a plan, and won't be running into a crisis. The plan is created, there are provisions in place, assets are protected, the special needs trust is created. So when the inevitable comes, although early, there are no surprises. The dutiful daughter, Michelle, can serve as a trust protector. She gets to be dutiful and help, but she gets to help the professional do their job. It doesn't become her full-time job. The fiduciary can take over, and as per the wishes of the family, Thomas has a special needs trust, subsidized housing. Although Micah suddenly died and Teresa has begun having cognitive issues, there's already a plan in place for the fiduciary to step in and take over. So the resources have preserved, and Teresa is getting her care as a dutiful daughter gets to still visit. So with the fiduciary, we'd like to show you how you can change the outcome with just a little homework and planning. So that was my shortened version.
Bravo, Jennifer.
I love it. Those are some good highlights of what Jennifer has described.
So yeah, thank you guys. Yeah. So there's just a little summary about, you guys can look at it in your time, because I want to be able to have time for questions. So I talked as fast as I could.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for a great presentation. I know there are many issues that we briefly covered, and more information would be helpful. I think it's interesting, a couple of thoughts. When we create financial plans, usually the goals are retirement, travel budget, and how to live a lifestyle that's comfortable. And these issues are much more problematic to discuss. But in the course of SAS's history of doing this for 20 plus years, we follow our clients through life stages. And this one is particularly challenging. And I think the most popular member of our team actually is Mina, because she's been able to meet with clients and present this life stage and its challenges and its solutions in a way that creates meaning and becomes much less burdensome. But this stage of life, there is no infrastructure in America to provide for this stage of life. It's survival of the fittest. And we are well aware of it. And in addition, Jo Beth and I are facing these same questions. And we've certainly overutilized professional fiduciary services for our 2 special needs adult children. And because we're a blended family, there are special considerations that need to be attended to and move from letting it just happen to creating intention with what we really want. And those are not easy discussions, but it's a lot more difficult in the end when you don't have those discussions. And so this is just the beginning for those of you who are viewing this. The solutions are not easy and not simple often, but the problems still exist even if you don't look at what your options are for solutions. So we're encouraging everybody to deal with this reality, similar to creating a financial plan, having some kind of plan that puts your mind at ease. It's actually been a pretty easy sell for our clients to talk to Mina. As soon as we bring up the challenge, they're like, okay, when can we make an appointment? How do we do this? So the reality is, and some of the presentation, for those of you my age, it reminded me of Queen for a Day. quiz show where the family in the saddest circumstances won the washing machine. But it doesn't have to be like that. But these are real situations. And if you can create a plan, or at least have a discussion, and it might not be with you, it might be with your parents, to deal with the situation, to ease the anxiety of everybody. You know, and there is an increase in anxiety when you first start talking about it, but it's possible to create a plan that lowers everybody's anxiety and gives everybody options and resources to move forward. It's especially timely for the surviving spouse with a couple who might not have been as involved in personal finances, although we get everybody involved. And at the worst possible time, the surviving spouse has to do all this stuff at the worst possible time again. And so professional fiduciaries can help you ease the pathway to do what you need to do and be able to solve this problem and be able to mourn and get on with your life as appropriate. So the examples are from real life. These guys are not kidding. We've seen it, and we've seen happy endings, as happy as they could be, by doing some planning. So I encourage everybody to either contact us or contact a member of the panel for either more information or consultation or some kind of follow-up service. So again, thank you guys. If there are are there any questions?
I have
Just
seen
oh, yeah.
any questions come through, and I did want to point to, we do have each of these fiduciaries' contact information within the slide deck, so that will be made available. Also wanted to just, you know, I know we're 2 minutes after the hour, but if anyone has questions and wants to place anything into the chat, that is an option as well.
It's a Q&A icon box if you have questions.
Yeah, I only have one comment, that all families have dysfunction, but not all families are dysfunctional.
Very much agreed.
Okay, and Monique, any questions there?
Can't come through, no.
Okay,
Well, I
Then I-
just want to thank you again, Ira and SAS team, for the opportunity for all of us to present and talk a little bit about what we do, and to encourage those out there watching to think more creatively about how to plan. It doesn't have to be the oldest daughter.
yeah, well, just quickly, my favorite, which you've heard me say, number one, I named my a relative who doesn't like me so much with my advanced medical directives, because she'll pull the plug. The other example is when the trustee and the beneficiary are the same person, and they're having to make a decision about, as Drake so wonderfully outlined, the different costs. Let's see, I'm the beneficiary, I'm the trustee. Oh, the board and care is just fine. We don't need the continuing care. So, and the other thing is, let's let families just be brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles and cousins. Having the responsibility to make financial decisions over one of your relatives, we've seen bad outcomes way too often. And in addition, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility. It takes a lot of time. And especially if you don't know what you're doing and you have to learn on the fly, as Elise said.
Mm-hmm.
Those are three compelling reasons to hire somebody who knows what they're doing. And these 4 people are very important. I encourage all of you to reach out and at least just have a conversation.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Attendees and professional fiduciaries, good to see everybody, and thank you for the very hard, wonderful work that you do.
Thank you for having us. Take care.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Excellent.
Have a good night.
Thank you, guys.